Okay, so
Okay.
now I'll do a
Got
share
it.
screen.
Let's go.
So the study, the name of the study today is Signs from God in the Sun, Moon, and Stars. And that may sound like kind of a wild title, but I think we'll see it fits with what is being shown with these eclipses and different things. And most of what I have today are things that I've gotten from other websites and other people that have dug into this. So this isn't my original or anything, but so I've kind of taken a little here and a little there and try to give credit to each one who, each website, that brought things. But so I think it'll be kind of a wild ride. So I say fasten your seatbelt because there's a lot of information to try to hold on to here. So first, just a quick review. These are some of the scriptures that we looked at about 6 months ago when we did the Heavenly Signs in the Heavens series. But today we'll apply these same scriptures to the recent eclipses and the recent solar eclipses called the Great American Eclipses because they happen over America. And they include the one we had last weekend. Some of you probably knew about that one. And also the one that happens next year, which is a total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024. So here's what God said in Genesis. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heaven to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years." And so we're going to kind of focus on signs and seasons. One of the guys' websites pointed out something that I don't think I had caught before about seasons, but we'll get into that in a minute here. So the Hebrew word for sign is, it can mean sign or, different things, or it can mean a warning. So if it's something that comes from God, it can be a heads up, or it can be a warning saying things are coming, things are about ready to change, whatever it might be. So Genesis 16, he made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. And we saw how these things can be spiritually applied, like in Joseph's dream, the sun and the moon. Jacob saw that was referring to him and his wife, him being the head of the home, the sun, and then the lesser light, the wife, kind of thing. And then the 12 stars were the sons of Jacob, 12 sons of Israel. But anyway, so there's always the natural and then there's always the spiritual. And verse 17, and God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. So these things give us light. And we know that Jesus is the light of the world. And he also talked about the sun and the moon giving us signs. And he was speaking directly in the end times that we are coming into and living in. And so Jesus said there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth dismay of nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. And in these spiritual pictures, the sea in Revelation 17 is the people, nations, and tongues. So it's showing that the nations will just be in a rage and running this way and running that way and blaming these people and blaming, every which way. And the Bible says race against race and all these different things. And the word that Jesus used for sign was the Greek word, of course, and it means a sign, but it also means signs portending remarkable events soon to happen. So it can be a warning to some, but a sign portending a remarkable event, to others. Because we know that the bride of Christ is going to come forth at this same time period. The man-child birthed and the bride of Christ all around this same time period. So a solar eclipse might be the greatest, most visible sign that the sun and moon could perform. It's something that causes the sun to be darkened right in the middle of the day and cause a huge dark shadow upon the earth, not upon the whole earth, but upon whatever segment of the earth is in the right position, where the moon would block out the sun's rays. And we'll be talking about different eclipses. And I just wanted to explain there's two types, well, a couple different types, but there's two main types of solar eclipses. One is called annular, and the other is called a total eclipse. So the total eclipse is easy because that just means it totally blocks out the sun. And then an annular eclipse means that the moon is in the middle of the sun and there's a corona is the word for it. I'll just show you down here. So here's the annular eclipse that we just had, October 14th, 2023. Just happened to go down near where John is, right through Texas. And then it went out into the sea, the shadow. But that was a annular. So I don't know if you can see this, I hope, but there's a little gold window around the moon.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Hey there, Yvette.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you. If you see me, that's amazing because I don't know what my hair looks like. Sorry.
It looks great. You're doing great.
Good to see you.
Hey, you too. I'm just talking, let me give you a quick 2-minute review. So we're talking about signs in the heavens, and we went through a lot of these scriptures where God said there would be signs in the sun and moon. And Jesus said the same thing, signs in the sun and moon, and that they're signs portending remarkable events to happen.
Okay, yeah.
And that a solar eclipse might be the greatest sign that the sun and moon could perform, where the moon comes right in front of the sun and completely blocks it out in a total solar eclipse. And then in a partial solar eclipse, if you can see here on the screen, I don't know if you can see, but I'm circling it here.
Oh, yeah.
This is called a corona, same thing as the virus is called. But this was called corona way before the virus. And that's when you see the rim of the sun all around the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because sometimes the moon is closer to the sun, which is of course bigger. And when the moon is closer to the sun, then we see the whole rim of the sun. But if the sun is closer in and the moon is farther out toward the sun, then the moon can just block out the whole sun, and that's a total solar eclipse.
Okay, thank you.
So all those things will kind of matter as we go through this today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So there'll be a lot of facts brought out, and the more that we can hold on to as we go through this, then the more it'll make sense toward the end when it all comes together. So this following picture comes from a guy named Gematrinator_85 on YouTube. And so he has a picture of the two, what are called Great American Total Eclipses. And you can see here, he puts the insignia of skull and bones right over the X, where these two eclipses put an X over the US.
Mm-hmm.
One is on August of 2017, and the next one is next year, April 8th, 2024. And very interesting is that, and so it's important to realize that eclipses are something that God set in stone when he made the creation. So it was, if somebody had the right mathematics, they could know that we were going to have a total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024. They could have known that thousands of years ago, because today they can chart out thousands of years forward and thousands of years backwards. I went to the NASA site when I was doing my book because I wanted to find out what year there was a full moon around the time Jesus would have been crucified, because I knew that he was crucified at a full moon because that's when Passover happens. And so anyway, you could go into NASA's, there was a guy that worked for NASA at the time that charted it all the way back to Christ and beyond. But anyway, I'm just making the point that these are not works of man that some conspiracy theorists, made up. These are signs and things that God has put in process. And notice from the August total solar eclipse to the one in April 8th, 2024, if you can see right here, and remember 6 is the number of man, these two total solar eclipses are 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days apart. So that's kind of amazing. Would we say that as a sign from God that something is coming, like the 666 system? You could sure interpret it that way. With 6 days, man being made on the 6 days, and here's a 666 for the 6-day man. But anyway, so here's another. So you see this makes an X, and then there's another X that happens with the annular eclipse that we just had, and then the total solar that happens next year. Now, what's really interesting is right here where this skull is, where the X hits, happens in the state of Illinois, in the lower part of the state, in a place called Little Egypt. So is that interesting that this warning, this X, let's say it's a warning of coming judgment, and let's say it's not even God that's bringing it, but the dark side, but God is allowing it. I'll just buzz around a little bit here. Just wanted to show you that picture. I thought I had it right up close here. So here it is, where this X happens. Here's the state of Illinois. It's like the whole lower third of the state is called Little Egypt. And then Cairo, Egypt, is right down here at the bottom. So that's where this X crosses over Egypt, as it were. So these are just little pieces of the puzzle.
Alex, why do they call that area Little Egypt?
Well, they say it's because, there was a time of famine or something, but that part of Illinois was kind of a fertile region, so they call it Egypt, like the Nile Delta flooded or something. I didn't really go into it that deep, but there's a lot of cities apparently that have names of them that are kind of Egyptian. And this was, they said, a colony of people from France came in there. But, a lot of times they'll have a front reason, and then the real reason is something else why it's called Egypt. And so I don't always believe, if Wikipedia says it's this and this, sometimes there's a reason behind the scene. So let me read a little clip. This Espinac guy, he's the guy that worked at NASA 20 years ago when I was digging through the site, and he's the guy that did all the full moons all the way back to the time of Christ and before. And then after I had got the information, I went back a year later, and it was all scrubbed from the NASA site. So that was kind of wild, but thankfully I copied it. But he did a book called Totality, Eclipses of the Sun. So I don't know if this will show up here. I guess not too well. Yeah, sorry. Eclipses of the Sun, Totality.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Oh, good. And I just wanted to read one little clip here. Most often in mythology, a solar eclipse is considered to be a battle between the sun and the spirits of darkness. The fate of Earth and its inhabitants hangs in the balance. With so much at stake, the people enduring the eclipse were anxious to help the sun in this struggle, if they could. So just making a point that in mythology, and also I think in the occult, it's seen as a battle between darkness and light, kind of trying to block out the sun.
Mm.
So going on a little further here, and I want to credit Pete Rambo and his site natsab.com for the following. So I find some of these Jewish messianic sites are kind of up on this because they're aware of the Hebrew letters. And so he shows that these eclipses, the X and the letter A, when you put all three American eclipses together, it forms the letter A, which is Aleph in the Hebrew in the time of King David and Moses. And also in King David and Moses, the last letter, he quotes here, I am the Aleph and the Tan, the beginning and the end. The Aleph and the Tav, I mean. And so trying to explain this correctly, that it's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter in the time of King David and Moses was an A and an X. And so these, X is a sign, and here's X, the last letter of the Hebrew, and then A, Aleph, the first letter, if you put all the great American eclipses together. So just kind of hold that, the A and the X, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, we understand them for marking days and years, but do we understand signs and seasons? Most who do not understand the Bible they carry, and I'm quoting him, would think, oh, seasons, you mean like winter, spring, summer, and fall. The resounding answer is no, at least not as the priority. So here is this Genesis 1:14 again. Let them be for signs and seasons. The word for seasons is moed, meaning appointed times of Yahweh. And they are listed in great detail in Leviticus 23. And so I just interjected a little note here. So yes, moed means appointed time of meeting. And almost every time moed is used in the Bible is in connection to the 3 annual festivals. So this is when God would meet with his people. And the sun and moon were for signs showing when that time was, like a full moon. It was a time, not every full moon, but Passover was always at the full moon, as was the Feast of Tabernacles on the 14th and 15th day of the month, of the moon, the month, which is when you have a full moon. So then he goes on, he said, but signs, this is the one, so that's for seasons, is moed, meeting the Lord, a calling to meet the Lord. And signs, in Genesis 1:14, he says, the Hebrew word is this. Now, this is interesting. This is modern Hebrew here, and the letters have changed since the time of Moses and King David. But in Hebrew, you write from right to left. So, we write Hebrew, as we start at the left and go right. In there, when they read from the right and go left. And so this word is aleph. This word for sign is aleph, and this is tav. Those are those same 2 Hebrew letters that we just talked about. But these are the modern letters. So he said, it's pronounced Ot. I've seen it also, people say A-U-G-H-T, same thing, but Ot, read right to left. And it is immediately recognized as having an aleph and a tav held together by the vav, or a nail. So this middle one kind of looks like a nail, at least like an ancient nail. And we'll get into that. Christendom may not recognize aleph and tav, but they will understand the Greek translation of alpha and omega. And then I added this little insert in here. So Isaiah 22:22, talking about, we know that the Messiah, this is ultimately talking about, and the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder. So he shall open and none shall shut. Sounds just like the book of Revelation chapter 3, right? He sets a door in heaven and nobody will shut it. And he shall shut and no one shall open. And next verse, and I will fasten him as a nail in a sure place. And there's a couple other scriptures that speak of Christ symbolically as a nail. And so to verify what he's saying about that Vav letter being a nail, I want to go to my Hebrew word pictures book by Frank Seekins. And this was written in 1994, long before these eclipses. And when you go to the Hebrew letter Vav, you can see it here. It kind of looks like a nail. And so right at the top of the page, he says, it's the nail, Vav. And he says, each verse of the 6th stanza of Psalm 119 starts with the letter Vav, because the letter Vav is the nail that secures. These 8 verses tell us the security of God's word and loving kindness will give us an answer to reproach and will allow us to walk in liberty. So it's kind of like something you can really hold to. It's a nail. So I'm just kind of, I don't want to lose track of where I've come from here, but so again, the Hebrew letters, and there it is, the Hebrew letter and the Hebrew letter on the great total eclipse that happens over Egypt. The Alpha and the Omega, or the Aleph and the Tav. But what's really wild is this Aleph and the Tav with the nail. That is the word for signs in the Hebrew. So it's almost like God is writing right across America, sign, with those two letters. If we picture Christ, the nail, fastening it all together, it's the word for Hebrew word for signs. And if any of this ever doesn't make sense, please jump in, because I don't want it to be confusing. So let's see, I forget who's writing here. I think I am. History or tradition tells us that Jesus was nailed to the cross by 3 nails, and Vav is the 6th Hebrew letter, and it is also their number 6. Like in Greek, the Hebrew uses its letters for numbers. So essentially you have 666, i.e. 3 nails. The nail represents 6. You have 666 putting Jesus on the cross, if that tradition is true. And of course, you know, from Revelation 13:18, we know that the dark side sees 666 as a positive, and they use it in their coming beast system. You know, we see Hollywood and all these places, you know, in the occult, they're really into the 666. Here's an example. You see the 3 nails here. That is 666. They're not coming right out and saying it, but it's there. You've heard of this Unleash the Beast Monster energy drink. I remember when this first came out, I thought, why do these guys get a big cooler right up front? You know, I remember thinking, if I started some pop, you know, all these corporate stores are not going to put mine right up front. You know, what does it take to get this front row seat? You know, if you can see Monster Energy, the O has a, remember how if the O is crossed, it has to do with the mark of the beast. But anyway, this is the 3 nails. I'm not trying to get sidetracked, but Unleash the Beast, 666. And here's the Hebrew alphabet showing nail, Vav, the 6th letter, and being the number 6.
Interesting.
So now we're back to Pete Rambo. And I don't think he's the guy that came up with this Aleph Tav eclipse scenario. There's another website where they, I think her name, I'm not sure if it's a lady or a guy, but said it was revealed to them in 1994, I believe. Or no, it was 2004, I think. Anyway, they said it was revealed to them, and they're believers in the Lord, so I'm assuming they meant from the Lord. But anyway, this site was pretty good because it had some things kind of clear, so I'm using this. So here's these ancient 2 Hebrew letters that have been written over the America. The last X of the total solar eclipse, as I say, is April 8th of 2024, so next year. The 2 eclipses, and then I just put a little note here, total solar eclipses, that neatly crossed the entire US 7 years apart for a giant tav or X over the nation, with the center of the X, the spot where they cross, being an area in southern Illinois called Little Egypt. So we saw that. That's right where this X is. By the way, and John, you'll probably read some of this in that book, but Skull and Bones is a Yale fraternity where is one of the most powerful secret societies in the world. So that one year, our American president on the left and our American president on the right were both battling to see who would become president. And that was John Kerry and George Bush. And they both came out of Yale, Skull and Bones. And to show you how elite this is, only 15 men per year are, and no ladies, they don't allow ladies, are selected. So only 15 men in the whole world can come in and join. And they have all these rituals where they do stuff in caskets, and it's all hidden and secret. But anyway, they use the 322 in their logo, and the 322, their anniversary happens a week before this total solar eclipse that we just had last week. So about 15 days ago was the 322nd year of this Yale. So that is just another interesting tidbit to hold. And again, if you put the three great American together, then you have the Aleph and the Tav. Even more significant, he says, I'm quoting him again, the eclipses are almost completely contained within the continental borders of the US. So the person that says these 4 Tav eclipses, they're 4X eclipses that happen, over, I don't know, 80 years, maybe it's not even that much, probably like a 30 or 40 year period. And we have these X eclipses, and one of them happens, the second X happens, like I say, April 8th next year. And then there's one more, I think, in 3032. This is the website, joybysurprise.com. And they go into that's a really interesting site. Again, I'm pretty sure it's a Jewish messianic site, and they see things from different angles. So it's really good to, take into account what they're saying. And so we know that in history, people often sign with an X. So that's another connection. And so God could be signing with an X, but and one last thing I forgot to say is in ancient Hebrew, Aleph was like head. It was an ox head initially, and then it became more of a letter A looking thing, but it was for strength, or like Aleph is the first leading, it was the leading. And then X was for covenant, and also it meant sign. So all by itself, this X means a sign in ancient Hebrew. And that's all in my Hebrew lettering book. So I verified all this. that was written in 1994, long before anybody was talking about these eclipses. On October 9, 2023, and I already said this, so I'll be quick. That was 5 days before the great annular eclipse that we just had on the 14th. That is the 322nd anniversary, so 322. So people have wondered, why do they have this 322 in their logo? Well, who knows if the devil didn't, have a picture of things and was saying in 322 years, things are going to start coming to completion. And it doesn't mean world government is happening next year or this year or whatever, but it sure seems like a 666 sign that things are getting ready to happen in a big way. And whether that the current wars that are going on, they've had it for 150 years in their writings that to bring in world government, they wanted 3 world wars, and they've already had 2. And so, and the 3rd World War, and this was written 150 years ago by Albert Pike, who was the real highly esteemed Freemason. He said the final 3rd World War would be between Christians and Muslims. So we'll see if that comes to pass. But either way, things are happening, and it does appear that God, 6,000 years ago, when he created the solar system, which is this amazing timepiece, that it was for now that he's put these signs that are crossing America. And they just happen to be 6,666 days apart. Only God can do that. There's no way that conspiracy theory people could cause these eclipses to cross, to be at these different times and to cross on Little Egypt. So the 2023 eclipse that we just had, they're now calling it a ring of fire eclipse, like NASA and all these sites. And so I looked back in various encyclopedias, and there's no talk about a ring of fire eclipse. So this is a new term that they've made popular. And so it makes you wonder, are they trying to say, hey, we're bringing fire upon the earth? It's a ring of fire. And I'm just throwing out different thoughts, for all of us to kind of think about. There's a lot of 666s in things. And it's kind of an amazing number. It's the 36th triangular number. So if you build a triangle 36 stories high, you'll have 666 bricks in it. So the Earth has a 66.6 orbital plane that it is kind of torqued. And some people say, well, that probably happened when the floods came at Noah's time. The whole Earth began to rock to and fro. It's hard to say, but so Earth spins along kind of at a tilt, and then you have an eclipse and then the sun and the moon are kind of going up and down as they go through their orbits. And the only time you can have an eclipse is when the sun and moon happen to be at the same exact as Earth, and that's what causes that shadow wherever the Earth happens to be spinning at that point. And again, the annular, now that is called a ring-shaped solar eclipse, but it wasn't called a ring of fire in my Encyclopedia Britannica. So just a couple interesting deals. The October eclipse that we just had leaves the US at noon over Corpus Christi, which means body of Christ. You can see here, it's the last big city to be in the darkness, as it were. You can see it has bigger letters than this other one. This other one here, Port of Aranza or something like that. But that's a smaller city. So Corpus Christi is the last big city before the shadow goes out into the sea. And look at this, it just happens to happen at noon. Their time, Texas time. And Nassau, which believers who dig into this say that they're a very deep part of the beast system. They want to go to war with the light during this eclipse. And we'll see that later. But if you take what NASA mean, their whole term, which is National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and put it in the gematrinator that adds up all the letters, in the reverse, it adds up to 666, if you can see that. And that's one of the main ciphers, is the reverse English. And how that works, just to give you a quick nutshell, the regular way is where A is 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And you'll see that the Illuminati likes to use 33 a lot in their numbering. Well, they'll also use the letters CC, kind of like a stamp that we're here. So sometimes they'll use that. But when you do it in reverse, then Z is 1 and you count backwards. And that's a very famous cipher for those that dig into these things. Well, National Aeronautics and Space Administration adds up to 666. And sometimes you have to wonder, is it God that is revealing these things, or what? So NASA always uses terms close to the occult, like this headline from their NASA.org page today. So this was yesterday I got this, but NASA's Osiris Rex. So remember, we've looked at Osiris. It was one of the main false gods in Egypt. Of their kind of Egyptian trinity was Osiris, Isis, and then they would bring forth Horus, which is the all-seeing eye. I think you've all heard of that. So here NASA's involved with Osiris, which is this satellite or whatever that's supposedly going to go out and gather samples from these different asteroids or whatever. And then now they're all intimately involved with the Horus mission, which, you could say it's the all-seeing eye mission. And you see this at nasa.gov probe study Horus. So remember that the Egyptians' god Isis and Osiris bring forth Horus. And we know how Isis is used a lot today. They're those bad guys that that we're all fighting against, as it were, how it's portrayed. Well, anyway, and so NASA has big plans for these American eclipses, which would make sense if they're into the occult, and the occult is into these kind of eclipses going way back. So here's a headline here. NASA to fire 3 rockets at the eclipse. Now you'd think, well, why in the world? And then you'd think, well, is this symbolic of the 3 nails? The 666? Is this their, but anyway, we'll keep going here. So NASA is going to fire them 50 miles high claiming it's a scientific experiment to measure the atmosphere during an eclipse. You know, they always have a front thing that they give to the people. This is why we're doing it. But then you kind of wonder, well, why is it really? But this gets more interesting as we see the NASA mission name. So this comes from Amykins. I forget what, this was on one of these YouTube videos that was talking about these eclipses. There was a comment underneath, and she says, the name of the rockets being fired at the eclipse is APEP. So NASA firing these rockets at this eclipse 2 weeks ago, it's called APEP. Well, what's that mean? Well, she says APEP is an ancient Egyptian snake that tries to eat Ra, the sun god. So, and then she says, I'm sure there is much more to this. So I thought, oh, you're kidding me. And so I had to jump on and, you know, I always try to verify everything, and went to that bastion of truth, Wikipedia. And so it says APEP, a snake god in ancient Egyptian religion, also spelled Apep or Apophis. It was the ancient, and I'm sorry, whenever I do some of this, it jumps around here. Let me see if I can get it to. It was the ancient Egyptian deity who embodied darkness and disorder. So NASA firing nails at this eclipse, rockets at this eclipse, they name it after darkness and disorder. And it was thus the opponent of light and Ma'at, whatever that means. So it's this war, as we saw in mythology, light against darkness. So they're this snake, you know, is and NASA is all part of this. So here's right from the NASA site, nasa.gov, APEP. And they have a PDF on it. And I'm quoting from this other one called Interesting Engineering, because they had, you know, there was a lot of fluff and hard to read stuff on the NASA site, but at least it shows they're admitting that that's what they're doing. So this site is saying NASA APAP mission to launch 3 sounding rockets in October. So that happened 2 weeks ago. 3 rockets will travel. And, you know, we probably didn't hear anything about this in our mainstream news. But 3 rockets will travel from White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico to where the moon directly aligns with the sun during the annular solar eclipse, October 14, 2023. And they're also going to release balloons. And here's where this really gets weird. So you say, you've heard of Disease X. And, you know, so you wonder, is this ritual programming for Disease X, or is there something else going on? Also remember the Chinese spy balloons that happened several months ago. I don't know if some of you heard about those. Maybe it was just one. I don't know if it came down in the US. And here's a quote from the article, this one that talks about the NASA mission. And they say, don't panic if you see balloons hovering during America's 2 upcoming solar eclipses. And he says it's probably just the National Eclipse Ballooning Project, live streaming and doing science above 99% of the atmosphere. So they're saying, hey, don't worry, this is just us, the good guys. And then this other article at space.com says that there's going to be over 1,000 balloons. And these are big balloons. So keep holding these various things. For those that studied 9/11 and the events that happened with the airplanes going into the Twin Towers, there were many movies and different things that foreshadowed that, where it was put in the movies and it was put in cartoons and Bart Simpson and all these different things. And they always put it out ahead of time what they're doing for various occult reasons. So the pictures below come from a 2008 music video by Metallica, where Russia, and I put that in quotes because they always want to portray Russia and China as the bad guys, because we always need enemies that we have to, go to war with. So Russia launches these balloons that release a pathogen that goes across the US airstream. So this is born by the wind itself, the picture says. So why would Metallica, this rock band, put out a music video with this in it in 2008? And they know what they're doing, the dark side, and they feed just like 9 months before 9/11 happened. I saw an interview with the director of the guy who, what's the name of that show with the X-Files? And he was going to have his very first show, and he was working on it. And he said those higher than him came in with a script and said, no, here's going to be the script for your first show. It's going to be 2 remote controlled planes that slam into the World Trade Center buildings. And so that was like 9 months before 9/11 happened. So these lowerlings that follow the devil have to go with what, when a higher up comes and tells them what to do, then they'll put it in their rock band thing. So this comes from Metallica, and it was released 8/21/08, which is the date of the eclipse, it says here. So that must have been an eclipse in 8/21/08, unless they're meaning the 8/21 eclipse that happens in 2017. I think that was the date there. But anyway, here's the lyrics to that song in their album that has this music video. So we cross that line into the grips, total eclipse, suffer unto my apocalypse. So somebody told them, hey, put this in your lyrics and do this music video that we'll show here. So here's some snapshots from that music video. And what they call this is predictive programming. When they put it out in the media or in music videos, long time ahead before things happen. So here's this picture of a balloon floating over to the US. In the music video, it says the strike is carried out not by bombers, but by a balloon. And so here's this balloon blowing up. And of course, the first cases of C-19 started on the West Coast. And then, so here's this balloon letting these viruses on the West Coast, and then it's airborne. It says our inevitable revolution spreads across the continent, borne by the wind itself. So they know where the Gulf Stream is going, and it goes from the west over across to the east. And then at the end of the music video, they have this guy taking over, and it says to the new world. There was a similar event at the end of World War II where Japan supposedly, and so I say think false flag because a lot of times they blame it on Iran or Japan, where it's really the dark side that are doing these things. they had plans at the end of World War II to send pathogens over to the US in balloons on September 22nd, 1945. But Japan surrendered a month or two before this, and so the plan was canceled. And Wikipedia has now taken down this page and redirected it to another page that doesn't have any mention of balloons. So I had seen this from a video that was a year or two ago, and on the video they showed this, and it talks about Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night. It's from Wikipedia, and they go in here and they're talking about these balloons. Well, when I went to this and searched this, it says that page has been redirected, and they take you to another page that says nothing about the balloons. So they often try to hide things as they move along. But here I found another old article about these Japanese balloons that they had planned for at the end of World War II, so-called Japanese balloons. So back to that Metallica programming, NASA released 50 balloons with an unknown spore over the entire US in exactly the same way as this, and this is admitted by NASA. And so with balloons coming across the US in the airstream, so as this music video shows, it's borne by the wind. The solar eclipse of August 21, 2017, dubbed the Great American Eclipse by some media, was a total solar eclipse. I'm just reading from this article here that went, across the whole US. And NASA sent bacteria-filled balloons along this eclipse path, the same path as the Metallica music video, and the same path as the planned Japanese attack. So here's an article dated 8/15/2017, and you can see here, why is NASA sending bacteria into the sky on balloons during the eclipse? So they do this when the sun is being hidden, as if in the occultic sense, no one can see what they're doing. And of course, they come out with a false reason. Well, it has to do with life on Mars. That's why we release a pathogen over the US, because we want to know if these little buggies can live on Mars. That makes a lot of sense. So they continue. As the moon blocks the sun's light completely next week in a total solar eclipse, more than 50 high-altitude balloons in over 20 locations spread across the US will soar 100,000 feet in the sky. On board will be Raspberry Pi cameras, weather sensors, modems. They got to make it look right by putting a couple of weather sensors on it, and modems to stream live eclipse footage. But they'll also have metal tags coated with a very hardy bacteria, because NASA wants to know whether they will survive on Mars. Again, does that sound, why would they go up above the US? Wouldn't you send a rocket to Mars if you want to see if something's going to live there? So NASA did not release what the very hardy bacteria was. It was an unknown spore. That's all they're telling us. And an article here, and quote directly from the NASA page, you can see NASA balloon eclipse 217. So that comes right from the NASA site, nasa.gov. Balloons observations. NASA uses high-altitude balloons to launch sensitive scientific payloads that observe the universe. These balloons make observation. Well, why not go over India or some other place, you know? For the 2017 eclipse, a number of balloon-borne experiments will observe the sun and moon's umbral shadow on the Earth. So this unknown spore, that's kind of what disease X is. They don't have a name for it because it's just this hypothetical, horrible disease that's coming. So this is from Wikipedia when you look up disease X. So this is from their site. First thing they say is not to be confused with clade X, which we've looked at 6 months ago. But anyway, so they say here they supposedly have a picture of this virus to scare people. Disease X is a placeholder name, Wikipedia says, that was adopted by the World Health Organization in February of 2018 on their short list of blueprint priority diseases to represent a hypothetical unknown pathogen, kind of like what goes up in these balloons, that could cause a future epidemic. The WHO adopted the placeholder name to ensure that their planning was sufficiently flexible to adapt to an unknown pathogen, e.g., broader vaccines and manufacturing facilities. So boy, we really got to get broad vaccines to cover, because we don't know what this X is going to be, but boy, we got to be ready, you know. And so I'm no longer quoting Wikipedia, this is me here, so I say, since Wikipedia reminded us of clade X, let's look at that real quick. So this comes from Wikipedia. Clade X was a May 15th, 2018 pandemic modeling exercise. So this is a year before COVID comes out, and they're modeling an exercise where a hypothetical infective agent in the simulation hypothetical pandemic resulted in 900 million simulated deaths. So they're saying, oh, hey, let's all of us Illuminati people get together and we'll have our clade X and we'll model what this pandemic and infective agent is going to do. And John Hopkins, you'll see they're always involved in this kind of stuff. So let's see if there's any hints they give us with clade X. So I say here, amazingly, and of course, purely by coincidence, and I'm joking there, the WHO, World Health Organization, declared a worldwide pandemic exactly 666 days after this May 15th clade X exercise. So on March 11th, they declared the novel coronavirus a global pandemic. And so here you can see May 15th, 2018, which is when they had their big clade X, and all these real high up people went to this. And then the date that WHO declared a global pandemic, that this virus has now become a global pandemic, is 666 days apart. So they know what they're doing, and they do things for their occultic strength, and also to let everybody on the inside know, hey, don't fight this, we're in on it, you know, whatever their reasons are. So I kind of covered most of this, that there's these 4 X eclipses. The X is the Hebrew ancient letter Tav, was originally written as a cross, and it was sometimes written as an X. This is just a comment by this person. And then he said, look into the 4 Tav eclipses, which is what I did. I then Googled that, and that's how I found that those other 2 sites all have the first eclipse in August, and the second eclipse 7 lunar years later. Remember, we saw that was 666 months, years, days later. Just happens to happen on the first day of the Nisan, which is the first day of the Jewish New Year, the agricultural New Year. And so I went and verified that on my Hebrew calendar that I have, this software. So that's the thing that was most amazing to me, that that second leg of the X happens on the first day of the new year, that it begins the 14th day count to the Passover, which is on the 14th day. So speaking of knowing, what's coming, this comes from a CNN article by Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And whenever you have names like this that are raised up and everybody hears about them in the media and they're the authorities and, oh yeah, we got to listen to this one, you usually know, well, I could say you really always know that they're servants of the system. But anyway, this article, he says, the big one is coming, and it's going to be a flu pandemic. So this is 2 years before COVID hit, saying that this flu pandemic is coming. How does he know that, But they always put it out ahead of time. So now I want to have a little bit of a good news break, because I said at the beginning, it's not all bad news. There's the bride of Christ is going to come forth at the same time, and that's what our focus is on, is just continuing to step in and become his bride, become what he wants, fellowship one with another. So the corona can also be a good sign, and I say not the C-19 one, but because with the end times is coming, it also means that the wedding feast is coming, and there's a wedding coming, and therefore the wedding feast, also picturing the Lord coming forth from darkness. So the moon, there's, yes, darkness endures for the night, but joy comes in the morning, because the sun is starting to come back out again, and the Lord is coming forth in power. An eclipse can also be pictured as a diamond ring. So there you have that wedding picture. And a diamond ring can be a sign of a coming wedding. That's what the last part, just before the wedding, the groom holds out that ring and hands it to the bride. So here's the picture of the corona, where the sun is now starting to come forth. And you can see why they refer to this as a wedding ring. So the above picture was that total solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017, at the end of totality. This is called the diamond ring effect. So that comes right out of Wikipedia. So these are all just, different points to kind of hold. In Joseph's dream, the greater light, and I already said that, was the sun, and then his wife as the moon. So in this book by Total Eclipse by Espenak, it talks about another mythology or ancient picture, is that the sun and the moon are 2 lovers, and they kind of close the door to have romance and be alone for a season, and then the sun comes back out. So that's kind of another picture that you could say it's the husband and the wife in closeness, and then the son starts to come back out. But anyway, I'm just throwing out different thoughts that have come down through history. So in a larger type, God or Christ would be the greater light. Or if we just say Christ is the Son, because he is pictured as the Son in different scriptures, then his bride would be the lesser light, us being the moon. We reflect his light. We don't have the light of, it's not us that is anything, but when we have his light, then we can show him forth. And the bride on earth is viewing this picture of the sun coming forth. So most commentators believe that the following scripture of the sun is referring to Jesus, just so we get some scripture in here. For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff. That means burned up. And the day that is coming will set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the sun, and this is the word for sun, it's shemesh or something like that. It's not a typo. It's the S-U-N, not S-O-N in the Hebrew. The sun of righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, and you will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall. And you will tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on that day which I am preparing. I just want to do something real quick here. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. Okay, nothing changed, right? I'm still right here where I got the circle. Yes, okay, good. So the sun of righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. We're going to go forth with healing power from the Lord. And you will skip about like calves, and the wicked will be ashes under your feet in the day which I am preparing, says the Lord. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, the statutes and ordinance which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming and great and terrible day of the Lord. So this can refer to Christ, but it can also refer to Christ in us, I believe, in the time ahead. And he will restore the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the land with a curse. So the scriptural picture of Christ and his bride making ready is probably the biggest picture the Bible paints for us living in the days that we are now living in. And then Psalm 19 pictures the sun as a bridegroom. So picture this again, the sun as a bridegroom coming forth. Psalm 19:1. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. For those of us who are seeing his signs and what the heavens are showing. Verse 3, there is no speech, there are no words, their voice is not heard, so we're not hearing them saying anything. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun. So that the sun, all the solar system is like a tent going where the sun, comes around, and he's in each month he's in a new constellation. It's like a tent around him for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. So that's that picture of the sun coming forth is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. So just picturing again the sun as this bridegroom coming forth. And then, you can go on and on, lots of good scriptures. There's nothing hidden from its heat, the sun. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. So I did all this already, Jesus saying there'll be signs in the sun and moon, and a sign can be an indication of a warning, the Greek word. Jesus said, he was talking to the Pharisees, and he says, in the morning there will be a storm, for the sky is red. He says, you guys see this, but do you know how to discern you can discern the appearance of the sky, but can you discern the signs of the times? Here's another gematria picture. So when you spell out the words October 14th, 2023, annular eclipse, it adds up to 666. So there's so many of these different pictures and signs and symbols that are all saying something. So here's October 14th, 2023, annular eclipse, adds up to 666 in the reverse, which is one of the four main ciphers. So here's from Starry Nights, here's the October 14th eclipse that happened 2 weeks ago. And you can see it happens right here in Virgo. For those that saw our last heavenly signs, we saw that Virgo was probably the time of the year. The sun is in each of these constellations for 1 month every year as it travels across, and then it comes back. Well, Virgo is the time when many scholars believe, I think the better scholarship believes that Christ was born. And so then we have the same picture of the man-child possibly being born because of Revelation chapter 12 that talks about the woman with the moon under her feet. Well, is this showing that there's a darkness that is being birthed? Here's the eclipse. It's happening right here in Virgo. Why did God cause that to be? Is there some meaning for us to grab a hold of there? And then when we have the final of these great American eclipses next year in about 6 or 8 months, whatever it is, 6, 7, 6. Here's the picture then. Well, that eclipse is going to be in Pisces. And remember, we saw how one of the fish, how the Pisces represent the church, and how one church is kind of going along with, there's so many pictures of two churches, the Laodicean and the Philadelphian, the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins. The 5 foolish ones are just kind of going along with the current, but the 5 wise ones are going straight up to God, as it were. They're holding on to the scriptures and trying to be keep awake. They're not. They hear the call to shake sleep and come forth, that the bridegroom is getting ready. But it's almost like this eclipse is saying there's a separation in Pisces coming. What's this going to be? Is this going to be where, hey, everybody has to take these new 5 vaccines, and the church is going to say, half the church is going to say, yes, we need to go along with this. We need to be part of the system. And then the other ones are saying, no way, we're not going that way. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical thing, but there is a time coming where the church is going to go 2 different ways. And this could be a picture of that, because it almost looked like the cord is snipping this church, this one that is going along downstream, along with the ecliptic, and then the other one is going heavenward. I'm not saying that would be the rapture. I'm just saying it could be this time. The time is now where these things are really starting to form and take shape. So we've seen so many things about X, disease X, the sign X of the, what God did with the shadows across the US. And of course, the dark side is into X. We know that X is involved in the mark of the beast. The X and the O is what their symbol. So there's a big X in Texas, and that's where Elon happens to be with his, what's the name of the cars? Tesla, the Tesla factory. And Elon has a strong presence there. And remember, he's really into X. And this April 24 does make an X over that part. It's not saying bad people are in Texas. We know it's in all states, there's people that love God and people that don't, in every state. But I'm just making a point that it was saying that this X comes over San Antonio and Austin between those other 2 eclipses. I won't go all the way back up to that picture, but Texas and eclipse both add up to 69 in the same cipher. And we know that Tesla was founded by Mr. X, Elon. I'm going to skip some of this. His corporation is now, he bought Twitter, and so it's called X Corp, right? Anybody that's seen Twitter lately, it's got a big X now. Elon says that X has the potential to be the biggest financial system in the world. And I think he's probably right in that. I think this is the final go at what's moving into their world digital cashless system, where you can't buy or sell unless, and we know that's going to fully take place after the rapture, when the devil is thrown down to the earth. And the mark of the beast is fully initiated. It won't happen until after the man-child is caught up, and the Satan and the Antichrist has his 3.5 years. But anyway, Elon said it would be like WeChat, how it is in China, where you get points and it's a social credit score. And if you don't agree with the government in some way, you get negatives and you're kind of a bad guy, and people don't want to associate with you because you're not part of the club. And so in China, it is getting more and more difficult to do anything by cash, because everything is done by electronics and this WeChat. And so that's what Elon is saying. He wants to that same control over the US with his deal. And of course, he's portrayed as this renegade, this real sharpshooter guy that came out of nowhere. but these guys are always placed, and they always come up through Illuminati, long-term Illuminati families, like John's reading about in that book, if you're still there, John. But anyway, nobody knows that it's the big banks that are setting this up. They think it's Mr. Free Speech Elon, that, let Don Trump back on Twitter, I mean. They portray like he's kind of this renegade, starting this X, but it's really the big bankers. He also founded XAI, which means, it's his letter X with AI for artificial intelligence. And SpaceX he founded. And then he names his kid X. So he just can't get enough of this X. And here's a little side thing. You remember these government alerts that happened? The last one was a couple of weeks ago. Well, let's see here. No, yeah, the last one was, 2 weeks ago? I don't know. Does everybody remember that? Just wave if you remember it, where your cell phone made a big alert. And it was a FEMA alert. Yeah, okay. Well, they had 2 of those in the recent past. And from the first alert, which happened October 3rd, 2018, to the eclipse that completes the X, which is 4/8/2024. So the next eclipse that completes the X, and it completes the Aleph, just happens to be 66 months and 6 days. So there's a 666 between the previous alert they did and the date that completes all these great American eclipses. 666 months and 6 days. So Jesus said there would be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And the stars, that includes the planets. They're called wandering stars. And then the other ones that are way back there that don't seem to move are called the fixed stars. So another sign is that Pluto returned February 22nd in the year 2022. So I'll just go through this and then we'll close. Thank everybody for their patience. It's a lot of information to try to hold on to. So Pluto is the god of the underworld. That's what he is called, this planet. Well, the god planet, the god Pluto that the planet was named after is what I should say. And he's called the god of the departed spirits. His earlier name was Hades. And those who have studied the Greek word for hell and that kind of thing will remember this word Hades. Well, that's what Pluto, the god Pluto was named. And so now here was a comment, using Stellarium software, the astrological turn was on 3/25. So they debate the actual date where Pluto returned to its exact date where it was on 1776 when America was founded. So Pluto has come back to the exact location when America was founded, but there's something else that was founded on that date. And so that the underworld and dark spirits are into. So we'll get into this. Western sidereal astrology says the result of disregarding it is that the tropical position of Pluto, February 22, which shows an exact conjunction transiting Pluto to its natal place in 1776. So that's just saying, you know, in the year 1776 is when it has come back exactly. But there's some controversy in that. So there's another institution that also started in 1776, and that's the Bavarian Illuminati. So this article says here, as two of the most dominant and influential institutions in human history, and that might sound like a big statement, but it's really for sure true. The two most dominant institutions in human history and influential is the United States of America and the Bavarian Illuminati. Both started in 1776. And they both experienced their astrological Pluto returns. So the Pluto return is the completion of one full orbital rotation of the planet Pluto, the outermost planet with the biggest orbit, to the location. So I wish they'd have put it here. I can't remember. I think it's 223 years. I'm kind of shocked that I didn't have that here, but we could probably add it up real quick. 1776. Let's see. $246 years. So give or take, it's Pluto comes around every 246 years. So that's a pretty amazing experience, and a pretty amazing sign in a way that a planet, a star could give, that this god of the underworld, this departed spirits, that something big is getting ready to happen. Now, here this guy is saying, thus the U.S. Pluto return is incontrovertibly in 2024, not 2022. So there's some argument that it may actually be next year instead of 2 years ago. And those who control things do like to hide things and make us all think, oh yeah, Pluto returned back here, where really, and then have nothing happen. So I'm just kind of saying it's right in this period that we're in now. The birth of the Bavarian Illuminati is on May 1st, which is 5/1. And so there's a lot of things that we do, like May Day came from this, them using this day. It's a big day to the occult. You know, they go around the maypole and all these different things. They have different celebrations. And then for the US, it's on July 4th is supposedly the reason that date was chosen is because the Declaration of Independence was signed. And again, a lot of times they give us the front reason and say, oh, it's because of this, but there's really another reason behind. This is a picture of this one false god that was associated with eclipses. So going way, way back in history, you know, eclipses have certain meanings. I'm going to skip some of that. That might be the end. Let's see. Well, here's the, remember I was talking about the Greek alphabet and showing how their letters, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, you know, they use those for their numbers. And well, it's the same thing in Hebrew. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daleth, He, all these, and then Vav, 6, the nail. That's how, and God, it may sound weird, but God is definitely into using gematria, the Hebrew letters, for meaning. Just one example is the name Jesus in the Greek adds up to 888, the letters, and 8 is symbolic for new beginnings. And when you look at Genesis 1, there's videos. If anybody's interested, send me a text, maybe, tonight or tomorrow, and I'll send you just amazing things in Genesis 1:1, how the numbers add up and correlate to different things. But anyway, here's the back of the dollar bill, and this MC so-and-so, these letters down at the bottom are the Roman, and it means 1776. Now, America was never pictured as a triangle with a all-seeing eye on top. So this is their 1776. And what they say is when theirs is not going to be completed until they set their all-seeing eye, the Antichrist, Horus, down on the pyramid, and he takes his position. So that's why it's floating there. And then here's the Statue of Liberty. She's holding a plate that says July 14th, and there's that same Roman lettering, 1776. Now, I was trying to find, so Yvette's husband, James, had told me a long time ago how, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, but he was saying the real reason that they have it on July 4th is because that is the time in the year where the sun is the farthest away in its orbit, which makes sense because the dark side is kind of pictured as at war with the sun. They don't like the light. They like darkness. And so I forget what it's called. I can't believe I'm forgetting that, but it's something that sounds like Apophis. And so I was trying to look that up on Google. And so I looked in Apophis, and I accidentally found something else. It's aphelion, is what this July 4th, it's aphelion. And then there's another word when the sun is closest to the earth. I can't remember it, but anyway, the point is, it's just kind of funny that, everywhere you look, you run into NASA in trouble. But so as I was trying to look up aphelion, I couldn't remember that word, and I looked up Apophis. It was just stuck in the back of my mind somewhere. And so when I did, I came to these articles on NASA Gov and Apophis, and that's when I remembered Apophis, also known as APEP. This was a NASA Apophis solar system deal, a satellite or whatever that they sent out. And it's another one, but it's also known as APEP, the Great Serpent. Remember, we saw that earlier where NASA was filing the 3 rockets, and they called that mission of firing those 3 rockets APEP, going to war with the sun, the serpent, the enemy of the sun god. Well, I'll just read this. It was the sun was Ra's great barge. So, this is mythology, sailed through the sky from dawn until dusk. And then as the sun descended into the underworld, they didn't know where it went. They're like, oh, so you have all this mythology. As it sailed through the darkness, it was attacked by Apophis, who sought to kill Ra and prevent sunrise. So you just have these pictures that go way back. But why is NASA naming all their things against the sun and against the light? So here's from a YouTube video, and we went into this a little bit 6 months ago. I had totally forgot about all this. But in 2004, astronomers discovered a dangerous asteroid lurking in space. And they were worried that its collision or coming close to Earth was going to cause the waves of the water to rise up and earthquakes and, all this stuff. So here's what it was pictured as, as Apophis, demon of chaos and destruction. So that's what Apophis is. And you can see this demon of chaos and destruction. It has 10 horns. If you look at the underbelly and picture these as horns pointed coming out, it has 10. And of course, we know what has 10 horns with the Antichrist. Anyway, this Apophis is the demon, and that's what NASA names its deal after. Nothing happens by accident. And notice this beast is coming out of the sea with 10 horns on its underbelly. Fire is also involved. So here I say is NASA's true mission, Revelation 13:13, and he does great wonders, the Antichrist, lying wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men, and he deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And he had power to give life to the image. 2 Thessalonians 2:9, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. So I think that's what, those on the dark side are working toward in all these experiments and all these things, lying wonders. So they tell us they're, that this Apis is that they're going out to this Osiris Rex. Osiris is going out to Aphex, and then it's heading out to Apophis. And they may say this has introduced a horrific new virus onto the earth accidentally, and all people must receive their new vaccinations. But anyway, think about, that's end quote. So remember this disease X that they keep talking about. So here's the article I was trying to find when I stumbled onto Apophis again. It was Aphelion, and this comes from space.com. On the 4th of July, Earth is the farthest from the sun. At about 11 o'clock on the 4th of July, the Earth will reach its point in its orbit where it is farthest from the sun, called Aphelion. So Independence Day may to them mean what they want is independence from God, independence from the sun. They want their world, their takeover. So they have their reason, but then they tell us, oh, no, it's for your Declaration of Independence. So there's always two things that are going on. And here's a news clip just recently. I should have got the date on this. Oh, here it is, March 22nd, 2023. So that's probably, and they do these things, that's probably on the equinox, March 22nd. A lot of times they and here's the all-seeing eye for CBS News. And they're saying Putin and Xi promised the new world order. So they're causing fear in Americans, that, oh, the bad guys, Putin and China, are creating this new world order. So I think what they do when they're bringing in this kind of stuff is to say, oh, golly gee, we need to ride on our war horses because we're America and we got to join up and against these bad guys and have this third world war. They try to, get everybody into this. So we'll send our young sons and daughters off to war. But in reality, the leaders are all at the same. Here's Bush with Putin and Xi, and here this thing says they're all outed as Grand Lodge Freemasons, because here security is all behind them, and they're walking along in their Freemason regalia. So they act like they're big enemies and play the game, but they're placed controllers by the big money. Interesting that sun and moon together also add up to 666. So in Sumerian, and carbon, which is the basis of human life, is made up of 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. The moon's equator, well, 6 times 6 times 6 equals 216. The moon's equator is 2160. And in gematria, you always drop the 0. So it's 216, just kind of interesting things. Every solar or lunar eclipse is either 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases after the most recent eclipse. So they come with these set cycles, which is interesting. And the Hebrew word for eclipse is 156. So that's kind of interesting, that it's every 156 lunar phases, and the Hebrew gematria, the letters that add up, that spell out eclipse, add up to 156. So this is just my note here. I was shocked at their statement, and we'll close after this, that all 4 of these X eclipses ended on Nisan 1, which is the first day of, that alone to me seems like such a huge sign that it's right at the end of the new year, symbolizing something new is coming. And that the 14-day countdown to Passover begins, to the Passover sacrifice. So I looked into that, and in the Jewish Hebrew calendar below, Rosh Kadosh means head of the new moon. Well, it means head of the new, and so it's symbolic, meaning the new moon. And that's when you can have a solar eclipse, is right at that new moon. So here it is, April, see here, April of 224. So it says April 8th, is what they tell us. But Israel time, because it's later in the afternoon, that eclipse actually happens on the 9th, which is the first day of Nisan 1, the first day of their new year. So that's the April 2024. So just another amazing thing. And I checked all the other eclipses, and those are the same thing. They happen right on the day as it's going into the new first day of Nisan, which is amazing that 4 eclipses all happen right then. 4 X eclipses, I'm trying to say. And remember, X was the Hebrew letter that can mean sign all by itself. So here I'm just saying the eclipse picture, let's see here, at Jerusalem time on 4/8. So this is when this next great American eclipse comes. But looking at it from Jerusalem at just about at the end of the day, so 4 minutes before the 8th, when this eclipse happens here, remember their day ends at sunset around 6 o'clock figure. There is no eclipse at that time. The sun is out and the moon is behind it. But that same eclipse picture, Jerusalem time, when it becomes a total eclipse, is at 9:57, which would then be April 9th, their time, or Nisan 1. So here is at that time. And then below, a half hour later, so here you can see the glow of the sun around it. So it's not really, but here a half hour later is, this eclipse is complete. And so that would be on the 9th. So for anybody who's interested, well, that wasn't it. I thought I had the dates of the 4 eclipses. And here below, the eclipse goes mostly dark at noon. Remember the sun in Amos's prophecy? I think I read that, where the sun goes down. I'll make the sun go dark at noon. Just like we saw in the October eclipse, it ended at noon over Corpus Christi. So in this video here, Klaus Schwab talks about a coming cyber attack that will make COVID look like nothing. So I won't show that, but again, if anybody wants that, or I can send you the whole notes here if you want. But the point is that all they have to do is flip a switch, and these events could start coming to pass very rapidly. So all we have to do is keep our eyes in the Lord and know that He is going to, that though things are going around like a storm around us, He is going to keep us safe in the midst of it. And we aren't going to be tossed and turned by all the stuff, because we're fixed with the nail, holding firm to Christ. We're not going to be shaken around. So anyway, I think that's all. And we can close it up with that. I'll do a stop share. And hey, Jeannie, I was just going to say, I hope you're there.
Yep, I'm here.
And Yvette and Mary Catherine, Lord bless you all. John, of course. Bless you, John. Anybody?
That was
have anything?
amazing. That was so interesting.
There's a lot in there, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
And those are the kind of signs you can't say, oh, so-and-so is a conspiracy theorist, because it's something God is doing. Nobody can argue against that.
Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna have to watch it again, because
I hear you.
well, there's so much, there's just so much, but yeah.
Yeah, you'll get a lot more seeing it again. I agree.
Yeah. And I love that you're narrating it, because it just makes it so much easier to understand. So.
And Yvette says, interesting info, everyone. Lots of details. Thank you. Thank you, Yvette. Lord bless you, dear sister.
Yeah.
And we got to see Yvette's new hairdo today. So
That's what she said. She goes, what did she say? She said she doesn't know what she looks like. So that's funny.
It's good that she
Anyway.
gets a day off. She can get a little rest, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay.
Too
Well,
bad Lori couldn't make it.
yeah, I don't know what happened with Lori today. She had something to go do,
Yeah.
but yeah, it would have been a blessing to have Lori and everybody else, but
Mhm.
we still had a good crew. So,
Yep. Okay. Good night, everyone. Good to see you.
yeah, Lord bless. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah. Bye.
Night, John boy. Go
Good night, Dad.
Astros. Go
Good night,
Astros.
Mom.
You ready for those Astros?
Yeah, but I don't think they're gonna be on TV.
Oh, okay.
How did you do it again? You did ML, wait,
MLB.com. But
MBL.com.
I'll end this and we can talk a little later because I
Okay.
got to end the recording. Okay, I'll talk soon, my brother.
Okay, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.